Hey, discipleship groups, I'm excited to jump into a couple things with you as you gather in your groups this week. I want to just provide some instruction and then also just a little bit of additional information on one of the Psalms that we're studying. So when we don't gather as a large group, you can expect one of these videos. Hopefully they'll be 5 to 7 minutes long if I don't get too excited. So the first thing with instructions, this week we'll actually wrap up the first 50 Psalms. It's pretty exciting. And with that being said, the commentary that we provided for the first month, it actually ends at Psalm 50. And so what I'll do is for the first 10 people who show up next week, there will be copies of Psalm 51 through 100. And then for the rest, there will be an Amazon link that I'll actually include in this video. And you can actually text me if for a more direct link. It's actually the same authors, and it's Psalms 51 through 100. If for some reason you can't afford it, please come talk to me. I don't want that to stand in the way. We just couldn't afford to buy 40 additional commentaries. And so I would encourage you, if you've enjoyed it, purchase it. It's a great investment. I think they're like $12 to $15. And so I would encourage you to buy that one. And then secondly, on the instructions, the next, I believe, 3 weeks, we are going to be in our discipleship groups. And so just a reminder, as you jump into group, spend time catching up relationally, but spend the vast majority of your time dwelling and delving into Scripture together, using your Hear journals, and just talk about, hey, what is the Lord speaking? How are you responding? And then we'll close each of our gatherings just with a moment of prayer. These videos you can expect on the weeks that you gather without the large group gathering, and I'm excited to be able to do this with you today. The psalm I want to talk about today is actually my favorite psalm, and it's Psalm 34. It's one of the first psalms that I was challenged to memorize as a young believer. And what's interesting about this psalm is it's a mixture of David's current circumstance and then almost like psalmist proverbs. And it's all wrapped around this idea of what does it look like to know and experience God and place Him as our first priority. So the first 7 verses that we see here are a testimony of God at work as He talks about blessing the Lord at all times and how He's going to boast and the humble will be glad, and how David sought the Lord and He answered. Now the circumstances that David is calling out this psalm is actually really fascinating. If you flip over to 1 Samuel, I want to say 21, David is he is fleeing Saul. Saul is pursuing David. David, in Psalm, I believe it's in 1 Samuel 21, talks about how Saul has killed hundreds and then David has killed thousands. David's name and renown is growing. Saul is wanting to remove David because he's a threat. And so David leaves and he's in the country of Gath, which is actually kind of the area where Goliath's from. So it's an interesting little tidbit. So there's a little tension between David and he's concerned about the king of Gath. And so what David does is he is trusting in the Lord, but he also acts crazy. He legitimately acts insane. It talks about how he lets himself drool. And ultimately the Lord would sustain him through this. And this psalm is in response to those circumstances. I would encourage you go and read 1 Samuel 21 as you read Psalm 34, and you're like, wow, there is a reason to proclaim this testimony of the Lord's goodness. And then the remaining verses in the chapter are these verses that are almost like proverbs. So he is kind of speaking these truths that have helped him in this moment of adversity. For me, I love these verses because it reminds us of not only the Lord's sovereignty and control, but ultimately He's the provider of every good thing. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Those who know Him, who fear Him, lack no good thing. These are written as proverbs for us to seek and pursue Him. Whenever I'm distracted, whenever I'm confused, whenever I might even feel drifting from the Lord, this is a psalm that I personally return to, because it is a psalm that calls us to make the Lord our first priority, and to make Him our first priority, and to continually seek Him and recognize that He does meet our needs. A cool little just kind of like geek out thing, if you want to like compare this psalm to the Beatitudes, you'll actually see some similarities. You know, those who thirst for righteousness will be filled, that's a beatitude. And then it says, hey, those who seek the Lord, or those who fear the Lord, lack no good thing. There's a common theme in several verses talking about the Lord's attentiveness, and they don't parallel exactly, but the same tenor, the same message is there, where there's blessings from God. Those blessings come to those who set aside the power tactics, the power structures of this world, and seek to rely wholly on God. And that's what this psalm is about. It is what the Beatitudes are about, that we would lay aside our desire for control and power, and all the things that the world would say are important, and that we as people would rely on Jesus. My hope and prayer is that you've spent time in Psalm 34, as you spent time in all the other Psalms, that we would recognize how very little control that we have, and how seeking power the way the world might declare power, it really leads to unfulfillment, and that the Lord is the one who brings fulfillment and joy and provides our needs. Again, I hope this has been really fruitful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again next week in our video. So take care.